We are on session 6, I believe. Got this nice little picture from the book of Revelation. Why don't I read the introduction, and then if somebody else wants to read, Christy, do you want to read the
Sure.
book of Revelation section?
Sure.
Okay. The letters of the New Testament offer a few more mentions of the devil. It was clear that early Christians considered the devil a force for testing people and leading them astray. Yet when Paul complains of the mysterious thorn in his flesh given by a messenger of Satan, he also says it was to help him from being too conceited. Even though he prays that it will be removed, God does not do this. This raises an important question. Is the devil or Satan a force working against God and God's plans? Or is the devil a scapegoat for bad things we don't want to attribute to God? In other words, is there a purpose for the evil the devil does, one we may not understand but will eventually be absorbed into God? In 1 Timothy, we read that Timothy is handed over to Satan to be taught not to blaspheme. According to Paul, Satan is part of God's plan to teach and transform, not to punish. It's almost as if God says, fine, have it your way, see where that leads you. God is not a controlling God. God is a loving God who believes in our freedom to do as we wish, even if it means we do awful things to ourselves and others. God offers guidance and is constantly trying to get our attention, but there may be a time for God letting us have it our own way for a time until we're ready to return to the good life God has in store for us.
The book of Revelation. While only one book, one whom Martin Luther himself did not think should be in the Bible, we have gleaned most of our images about the devil, hell, and heaven from it. The book of Revelation is apocalyptic literature, a genre of writing that uses striking images and metaphors meant to be very clear to the reader. It begins with Jesus dictating letters to the 7 churches, giving them very clear advice depending on their situation. The passage from Revelation 2 reads as follows: To the angel of the church in Smyrna write, These are the words of him who is the first and the last, who died and came to life again. I know your afflictions and your poverty, yet you are rich. I know about the slander of those who say they are Jews and are not, but are a synagogue of Satan. Do not be afraid of what you are about to suffer. I tell you, the devil will put some of you in prison to test you, and you will suffer persecution for 10 days. Be faithful, even to the point of death, and I will give you life as your victor's crown. Whoever has ears, let them hear what the Spirit says to the churches. The one who is victorious will not be hurt at all by the second death. To the angel of the church in Pergamum write, These are the words of him who has the sharp, double-edged sword. I know where you live, where Satan has his throne, yet you remain true to my name. You did not renounce your faith in me, not even in the days of Antipas, my faithful witness, who was put to death in your city where Satan lives. Nevertheless, I have a few things against you. There are some among you who hold to the teaching of Balaam, who taught Balak to entice the Israelites to sin, so that they ate food sacrificed to idols and committed sexual immorality. Likewise, you also have those who hold to the teaching of the Nicolaitans. Repent, therefore. Otherwise, I will soon come to you and will fight against them with the sword of my mouth. Many of these congregations were in the middle of cities with pagan temples. Others were surrounded by false teaching. It is unclear whether the author believes Satan is actually present in these places or if it's a striking statement to grab people's attention. What have the members of the Christian church permitted or let slide? In chapter 12, we meet Satan again, this time in the form of a dragon. The dragon is pursuing a pregnant woman, ready to devour her newborn. This has been interpreted as an image for both Mary and newborn Jesus as the Messiah, but also as Israel giving birth to the Christian church. This is the chapter where we see the dragon thrown down from heaven along with his angels, a reference to a Jewish myth about Satan once being an angel in heaven, but then being rejected. The Bible does not explore this myth anywhere else, but we will see in the next session how this has captured the imagination of many theologians and artists over the years. Finally, in chapter 20, we see the final defeat of Satan. He is released from his prison and deceives the nations, yet he is thrown into a lake of fire to be tormented day and night. evidence that whatever hell exists is reserved for Satan and his top dogs. One of the ways to understand this confusing book filled with stark imagery is to see it as bold commentary on culture. All cultures will harbor power, control, and forces that are destructive and abusive. Regardless of what religious face a land does or does not have, powers of evil can be terribly manipulative and cunning. The writer of this book wanted the Christian churches to get some perspective and realize that they cannot be neutral in these times. And secondly, that when all is said and done, God's way will win. This book had meaning for the first hearers, and it has meaning for us now. To take the images, numbers, and symbols too literally has never panned out. Neither has seeing this book as a code to crack. It's a story of good and evil, universal in its message. Should I read the conclusion?
Sure.
The writers of the Bible are not unified in their understanding of evil, the devil, or Satan. This was a concept that evolved within the Bible and far beyond it. As mature Christians, we want to see where we have imposed our own ideas back on the text and do our best to understand what the texts themselves say. So we will read these stories and think about them with fresh eyes.
Yeah, but before we jump into that, thoughts on the lesson?
Years ago, this is coming back, we're going to Holden Village, so the kids are young, and we're staying in a motel, and it's Sunday morning, and we're still in the motel, and I'm watching television, and it was a religious show, and they were doing these images from Revelation, and remember, this is 30-some years ago, 40 or however many years ago. So there were like printed drawings. Now that'd be more explicit, but repeating some of the things from Revelation over and over again that I would call as in the popular theology. And what continues to impress me in a positive way is the way at least some fundamentalist churches make things so easy to understand their story and their mind, and go to great lengths to reinforce it in a simple way with pictures or diagrams or whatever. And my great aunt, she was my great aunt, the one who used to bring me to Assemblies of God churches. She had a big wall hanging of the Day of Judgment, with planes crashing and everything crashing down, and these bodies rising from the graves and all of that. And she was into that stuff. But the point is, they make it very clear on what they're trying to teach. I've been bothered from the seminary. This has to do with what we're talking about. Is from the seminary, whatever information we got from there or the literature, we either don't say anything about it or we make it so complicated to understand that the average person won't even pay attention to it. And so when it comes to our witness in the world, if I can use that term this way, we fall short. Because in our tradition, we seem to make things so complicated to understand, or we don't know how to tell a simple line that everyday people can understand. You follow me? And so the imagery is vivid, and we can get into the devil and and the all the kind of satanic pictures and sexual immorality. And, Dante's Inferno. That'll probably come up next week.
Yep.
Okay, but my point now, when he asked what do I think, is that number one, when I was in the seminary, we weren't really given any instruction on the Book of Revelation. And when we do, it sounded like gobbledygook. And but to say simply, it's a story for that time and place that they were able to understand some of the symbolism in nature. It's like we sometimes use slang terms today that is common, right?
Yeah.
But if we took the slang term literally, 500 years from now, 1,000 years from now, we wouldn't know what it meant. So we'd be trying to figure it out. But here, I like everything you said. Yeah. Here now how we've exposed our own ideas back in the text to do our best to understand what the texts themselves say. You've been trying to clarify, if I can use that term, like we clarify, trying to clear out that, hey, this is what it says, if you want to be a literalist.
Yeah.
Here's what it says, now where you go with that.
Mm-hmm.
So, I just want to, that's like a long preamble, but you asked what came to your mind.
Yeah.
And this is a good picture. This is a picture that you include, for example, the graphic. Says more as an imagery to grab somebody's attention. And then if I was wanting to, I could take that imagery and do whatever I want with it, essentially,
Yeah.
to teach.
Yeah, whenever I have taught a longer section on the Book of Revelation, I usually start out reading a story that says, the Avengers of 9/11 got together. It was Martin Luther King Jr. and Harriet Tubman and so on. Now you all know these people didn't live at the same time, and you all know, but if I use the right names and the right places, and then I say, they decided to gather on Friday the 13th for the big thing, you'd know that's an ominous day. So I could write a whole story using names and numbers and dates that have significance to our American culture that in 200 years aren't going to make a lot of sense. So,
Is that true of like the number 666? Like what is that?
yeah, so,
It can also be 616, correct?
yeah, I think so.
Different translations have it different.
Yeah, they were using gematria, kind of a numerology type of a thing, where you could get a name and take the letters of the name and apply a number to them. And the numbers had significance forever. For example, like 7 is the number perfect, right? 12, 3, 40, these all have numbers. And so the number 6 is like less than perfect. Jesus's name actually comes out as 888, like a little bit more than perfect, like above.
Heidi, the other church there wants to use one of the rooms downstairs.
So do you need a key to open it up?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, thanks.
Is
John.
that okay?
Yeah, please, yeah, go ahead. Thank you so much.
Great.
The 666 comes out, you can put a lot of names, you can mess with a lot of names long enough, and they'll come out to 666, so people have freaked out. They're like, Hitler's 666, Obama's 666, right? Nero was 666, and that was who they think was probably the most historically accurate person for this. So it doesn't actually mean the devil, it means like a servant who is working on behalf of evil. But yeah, you could mess around with anyone's name long enough and probably come up with 666 if you really wanted to. So it's become kind of a bigger deal than it was originally meant to.
Something that came to my mind when you got to the end was that there was a talk about Satan falling from, was really first talked about in here, but it kind of reminded me of the section we had read, we talked about a few weeks ago, Jesus saying he saw Satan fall from the sky at that point. And so I was wondering if there was any significance in the correlation of those two.
There wasn't at the time. That's what's interesting, is that in the book of Revelation, they are not necessarily quoting that Luke 10 passage where Jesus says, I saw Satan fell. This is the kind of stuff that later theologians, once the Bible was actually compiled, they would look at this and they'd make connections that the Bible didn't necessarily have when the writers were writing it. And that's exactly what we'll talk about in the next session, how they took the word day star and Lucifer and then connected it to the Luke 10 and connected it to Revelation, and then voila, you've got a whole story about Satan and what happened, right? Plus a little bit more embellishment. Yeah.
So Revelation, was it a dream of John's? Is that accurate from what we know? And did John
Some
write
kind
it?
of vision, yeah. Some kind of vision. Apocalyptic literature was a genre. If you went to a bookstore, there would be a section that was apocalyptic literature, and it would all have similar themes. Somebody had a vision, an angel came, showed them mysteries. It was all symbolic, you know, and the angel interpreted it for them, and then they had the message to share. The book of Daniel is similar. So if you want to believe there was literally John who had this vision and wrote it down, or he had the inspiration to write in the genre to get the people's attention, the end result was the same, was the people who would read that letter would be shaken up.
And is that John, Jesus' disciple John? The one who
Possibly.
We don't know.
Yeah.
Good question.
Possibly, we're not totally sure.
Okay.
So I just happened to see on this thing, it says, the one who is victorious will not be hurt at all by the second death. What does second death mean?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Oh,
Oh yeah, okay, there it is. Yeah, honestly, I'd have to look again at my notes
okay.
on that one.
Okay.
Because there's a lot going on then about you die the first time, and then maybe there's a messianic resurrection, and the people either go with the Messiah to the banquet, or they don't, and maybe that's the second death. I guess I'm not sure. It's interesting in this section of Revelation. I think you can see where there's been some anti-Semitic stuff that's come out of unintentionally. The writer didn't mean for it to be that way, but by saying things like synagogue of Satan and things like that, those are striking words meant to say that there are certain powers, religious and not, governmental, that are not working on the side of God, right? And to sort of wake people up to say, you know, we could say the same thing today. There are people who are in the church in various facets who are probably not really on the side of God. They have a lot of power and they're saying certain things. And so if we were to write this book of Revelation all over again for today, we would be bringing up words and themes that would make us uncomfortable about what are we doing as Christians in this time? You know, what side are we on? And that was sort of the point. Well, there's a lot of Bible verses. I think if we want to use our time well, probably in the future I will write these verses out because they're so short. If I can just have us each look up one, and then we don't all have to do that. So if you're willing, Rich, to look up Acts,
I didn't know I had a
Jacob.
Bible in front of me.
Yeah, Jacob, maybe do the Romans.
Then Acts 3.
1 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, Ephesians. I'll do the 1 Timothy, and then we can pause and go around the horn again. Sing the New Testament song in your head.
General Electric Power Company. That's always how I remember Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians.
Oh my goodness. All right, and when you've got it, Rich, go ahead.
Well, I'm going to read this whole section.
Okay.
The man named Ananias, with the consent of his wife Sapphira, sold a piece of property. With his wife's knowledge, he kept back some of the proceeds and brought only a part of the proceeds and laid it before the apostles' feet. Ananias Peter asked, "Why has Satan filled your heart to lie to the Holy Spirit to keep back part of the proceeds of the land?" While it remained unsold, did it not remain your own? And after it was sold, were not the proceeds at your disposal? How is it that you contrived this deed in your heart? You did not lie to us, but to God. Now when Ananias heard these words, he fell down and died. And great fear seized all who heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So the line in there is, Peter says, why did Satan fill your heart to hold back? Because this was a time in the early church in which they were being very socialist, to be honest. They decided on their own volition to pool together all their money, property, and resources and share it, and then contribute to the poor. And you had this one person who decided to withhold the sale of some property and not tell them to hold it for himself. And so that was, why did Satan put it in your heart? So in that perspective, how is Satan viewed? What is Satan's job?
Selfishness, greed.
Yeah,
And he's the tempter again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Reminds me of the garden.
yeah. It's a sense of, no, we're not all in this together. You can be different. You can be special. We're gonna go back to the elevated, stratified positions of people.
Good thing Satan's not around now anymore.
Yeah. We got
Oh,
that all
yeah.
taken care of.
That holding back and not.
Yeah, I'm better. I deserve,
Well, as I just read it, because it says on the one hand they're contributing, that's reading in the preceding verses. But is the problem is that they lied about it? Could we have said, here, we're giving you 3/4 of what we sold, and we're keeping 1/4 for ourselves? But the story seems to imply they're claiming we're giving it all, and they didn't.
Yeah.
So which is the real lie?
Yeah.
Is it trying to, I'm just pointing, there's the difference. There's two things going on, greed,
That's true.
okay? Or, as we say today, be practical. He even said that in a sermon several weeks ago, or somewhere along the line. If we actually gave up everything and gave it to the poor, where would we all be?
We become the poor.
Yeah,
Either way, it's violating the social contract they agreed upon.
yeah.
So whatever the social contract is,
Well, was it in writing? I don't know.
Whatever it is
I don't
they
know.
did, that's
It's just that, that was it, could they have said, well, we're gonna give you 3/4? Did they all actually give everything? Maybe they did, maybe they
maybe they
didn't.
didn't, but that's,
Yeah, we don't
that's
know.
the point of God.
It's just
I
a
think
point
it's
of
it's the lie and the separation.
Yeah, it's a
ultimately,
lie. Yeah, just-
regardless of
Yeah,
And it
What it
happens to all
was.
of us, it's not obviously serve an example.
yeah.
even the term, I surrender all.
Yeah.
How can I surrender I just said it. You see what I'm getting at? Sententially, I cannot do that. We can't describe that.
You want to go ahead?
Okay. 16:20. The God of peace will shortly crush Satan under your feet. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ be with you.
Yeah.
And that is just the one sentence there.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, peace of God will crush Satan under your feet. It's interesting.
Well, that makes me think of the adage of to kill them with kindness. I mean, because you don't usually think of peace crushing someone, but then again, if you, when facing an enemy of hate and malice, if you show only kindness, and you can disarm that adversary to where you effectively crush their platform that they were using to attack you with.
Or if Satan isn't the other person, but is something in yourself, peace makes it lose its power over you.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. 1 Corinthians.
That's it, 7:5. Do not deprive one another, except perhaps by agreement for a set time, to devote yourself to prayer. And then come together again, so that Satan may not tempt you because of your lack of self-control.
Yeah, so maybe they're talking about fasting or something like that, that's a time of prayer, but then connecting Satan with being tempting you. So we're starting to get, listen as we read each of this. What is Satan's job? How does he work according to all these verses? And contrast that then maybe to what God is offering. Do you want to read yours?
Yep. When the Lord saw that they humbled themselves, the word of the Lord came to whoever, saying, they have humbled themselves. I will not destroy them, but I will grant them some deliverance, and my wrath shall not be poured out on Jerusalem by the hand of, I don't know how to say it. Nevertheless, they shall be.
I think we're on a different verse, sorry.
I'm sorry, pardon me?
Are you on 2 Corinthians?
I thought it was two.
2
I'm
Corinthians.
reading the whole thing. I'm reading Chronicles.
Oh,
Good heavens.
There you go.
hey.
Should I go and then we can come
Sure,
back?
sure, yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
It
Thank
takes
you,
time to
guys.
find it, I know.
Yeah.
Okay. Put on, so this is Ephesians. Put on the whole armor of God so that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. For our struggle is not against enemies of blood and flesh, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers of this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. Therefore, take up the whole armor of God so that you may be able to withstand on that evil day, and having done everything, to stand firm. Stand therefore, and fasten the belt of truth around your waist, and put on the breastplate of righteousness. As shoes for your feet, put on whatever will make you ready to proclaim the gospel of peace. With all of these, take the shield of faith, with which you will be able to quench all the flaming arrows of the evil one.
So this is a very interesting one because it talks about how basically evil manifests in powers, institutions, governments. It is not a person that we are to get, because you cut down one person and someone else is going to pop up in this place. If you want to, quote, conquer evil, in some ways it's living in a way and spreading the good contagious stuff, right? And that's what counters the negativity, the darkness, whatever you want to call it. Not to say that we don't go after institutions and change and ask to dethrone certain people and unseat people of their power. It's not to say any of that, but to somehow say this person is the evil, and if we get rid of them, now we'll be okay. There's always going to be someone else who crops up until we learn a different way of being with each other. All right, 1 Timothy says, I am giving you these instructions, Timothy, my child, in accordance with the prophecies made earlier about you, so that by following them you may fight the good fight, having faith and good conscience. By rejecting conscience, certain persons have suffered shipwreck in the faith. Among them are Hymenaeus and Alexander, whom I've turned over to Satan so that they may learn not to blaspheme. It's a very weird statement. How can Paul turn anyone over to Satan? It's not literally what he means. He's using that as a metaphor for basically saying, we've cast them out of our group. We've sort of not exiled them, but they're going to learn that they can't do what they were doing before, and that is their punishment. So in this case, it is a metaphor for being excluded, for being punished.
I'll challenge you back just a step.
Yeah.
If we can bless, asking God to bless the quilts, for example, what does that mean?
Yeah.
I was thinking about that. What does it mean? And now, if I can do that, can I not also then say, I hand you over to Satan? I mean, as a literal statement of fact. And I'm just comparing the two. I'm not trying to argue just for the sake of argument. I mean, in reality, bless those who bless you, curse and do not bless, etc. You see what I'm getting at?
If we can bless, can we condemn?
Yeah. It's just like even the seminary back in the days, profs couldn't explain this. Well, we can talk about the Holy Spirit at work, but he couldn't talk about evil spirits at work. There was no, that was all psychological. But we can talk about the Holy Spirit, and I couldn't get it, and I still don't get that.
Yeah, if that's what Paul means, that he was like, I'm going to exile you from the community and call on negative powers to come at you, I do not recommend that. I do not think it is our job to ever work with negative entities for any purpose.
I'm agreeing with you on that. I'm just saying he could.
He could have. If he did that, I think that is very wrong. It is not our job to curse.
I do too. But I'm just saying that in terms of the story without.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. See, traditional understanding is that God will bless or curse, right? Because we have those words in the Old Testament. I disagree. There you go. I disagree. I don't think God curses. I don't think that's in God's nature. God does not look at humans suffering and struggling and says, to hell with you, right?
Yeah,
I'm going to make worse things happen to you.
Yeah.
I think God's goal is to try to seek out and redeem and heal, and God's love is so infinite, that's the only thing God can do, is love. And if there's an opposite of God, it is one who seeks to destroy. If God destroys, then why do we need a devil? If God curses, why do we need a devil? If God tests and tempts and harasses and torments, why do we need a devil? Because we already have one. It's God. So that's my feeling. I think that I know we have biblical things that are different than that, but we also have to realize that that was a different time. In the Old Testament, for example, they literally believed God was the only force in the universe. Because there was no devil, no bad person, everything that happened was up to God, right?
Right.
That migrated and changed, as we see in the New Testament, to now we see that there's forces of good and forces of evil. And I don't believe...
Even in the common language that we'll use today, and I do hear it so often, God is still in control. We say that. I hear that.
Yeah.
Whatever that's supposed to mean.
Right.
But at the same time, not disagreeing with you, God has also allowed us a free will to do with this stuff. So is in fact God in control?
Right. Or are we in control?
Yeah, or what does that mean?
Yeah.
Or is nature in control? I mean, the universe has its own thing going that causes disasters.
Yeah. Maybe there's just a lot of things having their own control and fighting against each other, and that's part of what's the struggle right now. Is we have powers of God, we have powers of evil, we have humans trying to figure it out, we have nature, we have all these things clashing around.
But I think the whole thing comes down to, with all these different controls, there's only one gate to go through, and one thing to hold on to. That's gonna. Oh, whatever.
Do you want to read yours now, John? Did you find it?
I think we've got. I've got Peter here. So I've got Peter. So
You got Peter.
yeah.
Gotcha.
So if you got go, should I just read it?
Yeah, go for
Okay. Let's hope we got the right one. Discipline yourself. Keep alert, like a roaring lion. Your adversary the devil prowls around looking for someone to devour. Reassert him steadfast in your faith, for you know that your brother and sister in all the world are undergoing the same kind of suffering.
Yeah. Yeah. So the devil is a roaring lion prowling around looking for someone to work on.
But that's kind of an interesting thing, because I think that kind of goes into that story about all the different spirits that we have in ourselves, or whatever, where it goes, well, if they leave, so what comes back in? And I do feel that if we do not keep ourselves full with the Lord, that we leave ourselves open to things that are not good for us.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's quickly just go to Revelation 12. We already read Revelation 2 in the passage that Christy read. Revelation 12 ends with a really interesting piece. We kind of touched on this a couple weeks ago with talk of hell, but here we have a full story. If someone wants to read loudly 12, we'll end with this.
A great portent appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. She was pregnant and was crying out in birth pangs, in the agony of giving birth. Then another portent appeared in heaven, a great red dragon, with 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 diadems on his heads. His tail swept down 1/3 of the stars of heavens and threw them to the earth. Then the dragon stood before the woman who was about to bear a child, so that he might devour her child as soon as it was born. And she gave birth to a son, a male child, who was to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. But her child was snatched away and taken to God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God, so that there she can be nourished for 1,260 days. And war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon. The dragon and his angels fought back, but they were defeated, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven. The great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. Then I heard a loud voice in heaven proclaiming, "Now have come the salvation and the power, and the kingdom of our God, and the authority of his Messiah. For the accuser of our comrades has been thrown down, who accuses them day and night before our God. But they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb, and by the word of their testimony, for they did not cling to life even in the face of death. Rejoice then, you heavens, and those who dwell in them. But woe to the earth and the sea, for the devil has come down to you with great wrath, because he knows that his time is short." So when the dragon saw that he had been thrown down to the earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. But the woman was given to the 2 wings of the great eagle, so that she could fly from the serpent into the wilderness, to her place where she is nourished for a time, and times, and half a time. Then from his mouth the serpent poured water like a river after the woman, to sweep her away with a flood. But the earth came to the help of the woman. It opened its mouth and swallowed the river that the dragon poured from its mouth. Then the dragon was angry with the woman, and went off to make war on the rest of her children, those who keep the commandments of God and hold the testimony of Jesus.
Okay. Yeah, an interesting, again, vision. Some people think the woman is Israel giving birth to the Christian church. Could also be Mary giving birth to Jesus. Lots of different ways you could interpret it. What I found really interesting that I hadn't really heard before was they mentioned that Satan is the accuser. They mentioned it several times, accusing people before the throne of God. And that to me was really poignant, because it made me think of that. You have these people standing before God in need of mercy, and Satan's pointing out everything they've ever done wrong and how they don't deserve it. If that's the role of Satan, to convince us that we're worthless, to separate us from believing that we're loved, to get us infighting against with each other, I mean, isn't that the whole game? You know, well, you would be better if you did this, or that person's your enemy and you're an awful human being. So if that's Satan's role, it's clearly not God's role. God is the one that reminds us then, no, you are worthy. I do love you. It was never about if you were perfect or not. It was never about making sure you did all the right things in order to be loved. You are already loved. You are already. And so, to me, that's fascinating because sometimes the church in the past has mimicked the wrong voice. It has been the voice of the accuser telling us how worthless we are, rather than being the voice of God saying, no, even so, I love you anyway. You're loved, you're worthy, you're part of me. There we go.
And I
1901.
go ahead.
I'm sure the Norwegians said something similar, but 1901 was an English translation of a Swedish translation going all the way back to Loretto Spizzi of the liturgy. Okay? We used to do this at the seminary, heritage services. And the point is, in the service of 1901, there's a declaration of grace, and then the pastor goes on to say, and by the same authority I declare to the unrepentant, and there's the cursing,
Oh,
in the liturgy.
yeah,
Ouch.
And so that was being done,
yeah,
even in the worship.
yeah.
Well, Jesus died on the cross, who made us spotless in front of to God. So here God sees us as totally perfect and spotless, and then you got the devil trying to interject that. And I don't think the devil can do that, overtake what Jesus did.
No, but what's interesting, did we say this last week or was it on Tuesday? I love this. They said, the devil knows he has no power over God. The only power he has is to convince us that we are not lovable by God. It's the only power that Satan has. Therefore, if we connect it to that, the breastplate of God and everything, what is our armor? Is aligning ourselves with God and remembering the truth of what God is, which is love. When we surround ourselves in that mercy, love, and forgiveness and remember that is already there, then when Satan comes in to tell us how awful we are and what a bad job we did today and how we're like, it's not even the point, buddy. Try someone else.